Tanya, let me just start by saying a big thank you for joining us for a show this morning. I know you and I connected. God, it literally feels like, yeah, it would have been back in the spring. I think we met at an event locally. So yeah, it was great to meet you then. Obviously, been trying to get you on the show since, and delighted to have snaffled you this morning. So thank you for coming and joining us.
Not a problem at all. Thank you for inviting.
Brilliant stuff. So Tanya, I have, as I mentioned before, to try and do 20 minutes on you and your background is going to be tough, because you've done so many things and so many interesting things, and I'm going to want to pick into all those different areas that you've worked in. But just start by giving our listeners a bit of a flavor and a background, perhaps starting at the beginning, on your career, the choices that you've made, the decisions that you've undertaken, the pivots that have occurred that have led you to where you are now.
Yeah, I think the big part of what I'm doing and my inspiration actually comes from my childhood, in a sense. And when people say unprivileged background, I think I had massively privileged background, right? We had no mobile phones, we had nothing really to entertain ourselves. So as a kids, we spent most of the time in the forest nearby. But the issue is that, of course, the forest was in eastern Ukraine and not far from the coal mine. And as a kids, we could see how the coal mine development, when you extract the coal and all the waste stone and so on, was piled up pretty much near the forest, and it was claiming away bits of the, fields that we were playing in and all of that stuff. So to me, it was very visual in a sense of how the bad industrialization, if I may say so, was claiming away what we enjoyed as a kids. I think when I was sort of growing up a bit, I grew up with my grandmother anyways, but she was the big fan of Margaret Thatcher. And I know it sounds horrible, and in this country I shouldn't even mention it, but the whole point about, we just don't like this coal mine, something has to be done about it. And even though my family comes from this kind of background, I'm very, very cautious that on one side, it's one of those balances that it's a livelihood for people and it's obviously jobs and whatever. But on the other side, it was always in the back of my mind of how can it be done better? It's sort of driven me through my career in a sense of like, when I earn more money, I will try to fix it. I'll try to come back and fix it. So,
and Tanya, sorry, I've got to ask you. So, just to give our listeners a real flavour. So, what sort of when you're experiencing, it's such a, like you say, it's such a visual sort of immediate influence on you at a formative age to literally see the impact of industrialization on your experience of nature and your thrill and joy of nature. Like, how old are you at this point? Like, what's the age that you're experiencing this?
It's all the years from since I was born, effectively, and then until I finished school. So it was pretty much over the course of, I guess, 17 years. But when I was before school, I always all the time lived in there. When I started school, I moved to south of Ukraine to live with my parents. But every summer I would come back, and it was even more obvious because you have the snapshots, like break and then next month and like next year. So you can see how it was all progressing. And I think the pivotal moment was when we were already teenagers. We went to our favorite place and the big oak tree was chopped down. And it was like, you can't do that. Yeah. And yeah.
And that must have, Tanya, that must have really, like, in terms of the impact that has upon your psyche, your intention, your motivation, like that really does make sense of then that real drive and determination that I know then is the sort of the influence on the career choices that you made. Let me touch on that's your sort of childhood, if you like. What in terms of further education, is that what you go into next, or do you go into work immediately after school?
Oh no! I did the degree, but because I didn't know English and I didn't have money to pay for English or anything like that, I chose the degree that I could do without having to do English exams, and it was economics, right? It was lots of math and whatever. But I was very lucky because I went to the best uni in Ukraine, technical uni. It was in Kharkiv, And our group was surprisingly sponsored by Boeing, and we were enforced lots of English on us, and we had English every day, 1 hour a day, and a lot of even math was in English in some point. So it's how I got to learn English, I guess.
I love that. You tried not to have to take a degree that involved English, and then you ended up having it anyway. Brilliant.
Yeah. And then, of course, this whole thing clicked that I think when I finished my degree, I got involved in a few international startups in Ukraine because I happened to speak English when other people didn't. And yeah, I remember there was this group from in the north of UK actually coming to Ukraine trying to help with this whole coal mine optimization. And the guys were talking about how things are done in here. And I think it's what driven me to start and look for work opportunities. Mm-hmm. On saying that, I failed all the English tests that was possible to fail in terms of doing all the study abroad or, C2 or whatever, B2, all those levels, haven't done it, passed anything of that. So I just applied for the jobs, I was looking for different options and whatever. And then came across the outsourcing project that initially came into Ukraine, worked for them for a while, and then moved to UK on this whole job transfer. Worked in Bristol and ended up in technology, e-commerce field. As it happens, of course, you join the company that is meant to be very successful, realize it's on the brink of bankruptcy, and you think, okay, right, your work visa depends on this company, so what do you do, right? You make it a success. Got involved into selling that business. It's where I got the bug for M&As, the whole negotiations, really, really liked it. I took a role of CFO at the time in that company. And when it was sold, set up my own thing. In 2008, it was the start of my big business, I guess. Worked on it for good 8 years from startup to complete sale. But that was for money. That was great, good revenues, sold it again, amazing. Got out, had 3 years non-compete. And then it's when I got this back to my roots, I guess. And I thought, okay, now I've done my jump, right, from the depths of coal mine area, Western Ukraine, and the amazing southwest of England, right? Wonderful. So now I need to do something, not that I need to do something, but I really wanted to do something that I can give back in a sense. And this is how this whole project started in what we are doing now. So a friend of mine said to me, oh, vouchers seems like a big thing at the moment. People buy lots of things with discounts and coupons, but let's try and promote sustainable brands because those brands make a difference. So it's how the whole idea came up in 2019, it was, right? Genuine before COVID, before everybody was talking about it. And then we come against the brick wall that how do you classify brand as sustainable, okay? And then, of course, it's your subject of expertise in terms of the whole greenwashing. And you go to Exeter and the building site that was around there for 20 years. It was not sustainable. It has a big sign of sustainable building construction, whatever. Nothing changed, the same tractors behind the wall, but it's just a different sign. So that's it.
And Tanya, that I always love asking this question of somebody like yourself about, give us an introduction to your career. And it's always the people, in all honesty, that have done, fantastic, brilliant things that have this ability to just underplay and condense everything into such a short amount of time. So that would be my first acknowledgement, as I think it's interesting how people like yourself introduce themselves. Let me ask you the question. You mentioned there about, you described this formative experience in Eastern Ukraine and the impact that had upon you in terms of seeing, firsthand in sort of, in full view, the impact of industrialization, human impact on the environment, if you like. And you then go ahead and have a really successful career, working in an organization, becoming CFO. Then you go and start your own business. You realize a really positive commercial outcome. Like, was there always that sense for you that I'm going to go be successful commercially. I'm going to build my reputation. I'm going to build my back pocket, if you like. And then at that point, I'm going to look to focus my energy and effort on perhaps something that's more innate to me during my experience of growing up and important to me in helping to address some of these sustainability issues. Is that a fair overall synopsis of how your career has played out?
Well, pretty much, because I never had any money when I was a kid. It's a, it didn't exist, or like the family wasn't really well off. And to change things, and it's a very pragmatic and down to earth approach to change things, you need to pay people to get things done. And to pay people to get things done, you need to earn money. So my focus was, okay, this is, I have responsibility for the family. This is what I'm doing. I didn't have a plan B, to be honest, because the investments, as you know, they don't come very often, and especially in Ukraine. So the whole thing is like you make it yourself. Yeah. So money first, get to the level when I was, comfortable and had extra to put into what I really want to do and what I'm doing now.
I think it's brilliant. I think it's we talk about this on the show quite a lot. We talk about the need for it's great to have idealistic views of these sorts of subjects and these sorts of paths that we've all entered on, but we need to all be pragmatic at the same time and sympathetic to the way that the way that our systems work, and we have to play the game within the confines of the system that's there, and that's ultimately what it sounds to me like you've done brilliantly successfully. Tanya, let me ask you that. I want to touch upon. We're going to come back and talk about question zero more at the end, but and I know you started up another business before, but I'm always fascinated to get a bit more from guests who have previously been in a sort of a more corporate role, if you like, within a larger organization, who have then gone through the experience of starting up their own entity and the experience of that. Can you just touch upon what that was like for you? And what were the biggest lessons? What were the biggest, did you enjoy it from the start? Was it terrifying? Just give our listeners a real flavor as to what that transition was like for you.
Well, it was very interesting in a sense that I need to admit, after all of this experience of starting our own business and actually driving to the exit, I think I'm becoming addicted to the whole adrenaline of the whole thing, because it's like, yeah, it's much more stressful, of course, than working for somebody else, but it's much more interesting as well. And I think it probably comes with my personality because, like I said, growing up in the forest, you're kind of adventurous by the nature anyways. So I really enjoyed it. But it was partially driven by necessity as well, because I managed a very technical team. So I had basically at the end of when the company was sold, it was 72 technical guys.
Mm-hmm.
Bless them, they're not social, right? So you had to have somebody to be out there, and it was petrifying because I was conscious about my accent initially, to be able to go on trade shows and big speeches and so on. But I don't know. I think I just took it one day at a time and had a goal and had responsibility for people working for me. And well, I don't know. I didn't have plan B. So it was my plan A that I had to execute. And I really enjoyed it during the time of it. So it was really good. In terms of advice for other people, startups and so on, I had 3 children, so I had to earn enough to be able to put them in a childminder and whatever. This is something to keep in mind. Family gets in the way completely. And I don't know, just sort of believe in things that I knew it was the right thing to do. So I just carried on with it. So those wobbles, I see many people that they think, oh yeah, I may fall back on my consultancy, or I will get another job. It's when the things go wrong. You don't have plan B. You have to be focused and you have to make your way through it. It's what, determination and resilience. I think those things that are essential for people.
Do you know what? I love that because it's hard, isn't it? It's a really hard. I mean, I'd love to get a sense from you at the very beginning of your first startup, what those first kind of year or so was like, because I think we have this, you just look at the amount of reels that you get online where people, there's the way that being a startup founder and it's all glitz and it's glamour and it's all, it's all positioned in a way that just seems, so overly accessible, I think, in a way. And actually what you don't often get is this is going to be a really tough road. It's going to be a really satisfying road and potentially a very fruitful road. But actually you're about to get involved in something that's going to take over, and that's going to be everything to you, and is going to be unpredictable, and it's going to be, scary at times. And was that at the very beginning of your startup? Obviously you ended up exiting, so you got to the ultimate outcome, but what was that similar for you at the beginning?
Very similar, considering, like I said, I had 3 children and a new baby at the time as well.
Wow.
So I had an option. I was offered a good job actually in London, but I don't like working in London, right? I had my lovely lifestyle in Somerset near Glastonbury. Why did I even move to London? So it's kind of decision making of all of that was, I think, well, yeah, one of those things. But I mean, realistically speaking, I had £20,000 on my bank account. Okay,
right.
And this was my starting budget. Okay, for the whole business of the whole thing. So what do? You probably, well, at the time you couldn't do easy Amazon hosting, so we had to do some collocation. So most of those money went into the paying for the servers and technical licenses and whatever. And then you just get on with it and focus on monetization as fast as possible. So it's scary, you're very tight on budget. Nobody would give us at the month. In 2008, money we were not around. You go to the bank and ask for 10,000. They say computer says no, right? Because it's global crisis. Money not around. So,
this is not a good time. Yeah.
Exactly. So we just had to focus on step by step, small monetization, bigger monetization. And I think it's when where we become successful. And it's what I would like to advise to general startup. Everybody is so focused on raising money. Try to focus on how you can start making money as soon as possible, like even a little bit. Okay. And then it keeps you going, and then you have stronger position to go to the investors afterwards and so on. So I think what saved me is my terrible personality and desire to stay in Somerset, but also very pragmatic approach on what we can do step by step to get there.
I love that, Tanya. Shout out to Somerset in the UK for being the inspiration behind Tanya starting her successful business. I love that. I want to ask another question about your experience. Any differences in your experience of starting a business that, in your own words, had a really kind of clear commercial focus with your first business versus the experience of you going through where, you're building something now that has, and I'm putting words in your mouth here, more of a purpose-driven nature to it? Like, what's the experience like for you day to day of those two types of entities?
Very different. And I think just to give you the whole flavor of my determination, I knew that I'm going into completely unknown waters for myself. And we are talking here sustainable finance, right? And all the big guys with ties, not from Somerset, obviously. So I literally, and this is how I do things, okay? I said, okay, I need to improve my knowledge because I can't sell stuff that I don't deeply know about.
Yeah.
I Googled the shortest finance course in sustainability or sustainable finance, okay? So what came up as the extra university business school that happened to be 15 minutes from me. And they were top business school on all that kind of stuff. And I put my documents in and I did 9 months of suffering and learning all of that. And it gave me confidence. I mean, I passed all the exams, surprisingly, but that gave me the confidence to go and talk to economist guys and talk to the sustainability conferences, go to the United Nations events and so on, to be able to understand what they're talking about ESGs and carbon accounting and whatever. And this is the whole, it was very different, but I think I knew where I was going, but I had to get my backyard in order to get there.
Mm-hmm.
So it was way much more effort because people have to take you seriously when you're doing this kind of thing. And you have to be knowledgeable, way more knowledgeable in comparison to CTR or price per click that was obviously our focus before.
Super interesting. And what about just personally? Like, I want to hear like your experience of the overarching like intention for what you're doing being making a commercial return versus having an impact. Has that influenced like your experience of your work at all, or is it just essentially that the drive and determination is ultimately to realize an outcome? It just happens to be two different outcomes that you're focusing on from one to the other.
No, I think impact is a very important part of this thing that we are doing. And I think it came from frustration, because during my amazing experience in university and all those conferences, I heard a very good speech from one of the top guys in Deutsche Bank. And he said, there is too much talk and not enough action. So we have all these millions, billions of money flying around with supposedly green investments and whatever. And if you look at the graph of a climate change, right, it still keeps rising. So nothing actually physically being done. And yeah, to me, it's driven by frustration. And of course, coming from e-commerce, I suddenly realized that this impact that we are focusing on can be very tangible and can be very deliverable. Because coming back to PPCs and stuff, right? If we put sustainable product in front of the consumer in the right way, we can persuade them to buy this thing. And if they buy better product, it may stop child labor somewhere in whatever, right? So this kind of become very tangible impact rather than some kind of hypothetical vision or some kind of philosophy of impact. So for me, I'm very pragmatic again. I only do impact when I can actually see that it's actually happening. So.
How incredibly, how incredibly wonderful to hear, because you do hear a lot of talk and a lot of nice words in the space without perhaps at times people focusing on, as you say, the tangible metric-driven outcomes, if you like. So that's really great to hear, Tanya. Brilliantly, as expected, we've already blitzed through the 20 minutes on you, and I don't feel like we've really done justice to it, but. We'll move on now, and I'll ask you perhaps to just introduce to our listeners the article that we shared with you by Tom Fanelli in August this year. Can you just start by just providing a brief introduction for our listeners, and then perhaps just picking out whatever the most interesting points were within the piece for you?
Yeah, it's a good article that addresses the subject of sustainability and e-commerce. And I think for me, again, it's one of those tangible elements of sustainability that we can actually deliver, that we can do. And I think more information has to be provided on it. And that's where our business obviously sits in. But the article is good in summarizing how businesses, sustainable businesses, can improve the whole impact outcomes, and how us as the people, as such as the shoppers, can also positively contribute to sustainability in a very proactive way. So I mean, the main points, of course, is that kind of understanding the e-commerce itself and sustainability in it. And like I said, I was at the conference, in the big e-commerce conference end of October, and it was a lot of questions from technology providers, because we can feel that the word sustainability has to be embedded in what we are doing as people pushing all the goods, to our audiences. So I think the tough thing, and also that is summarized in this article, is that business has to make money in the first place. So it's a balance between the sustainability in e-commerce and making money in e-commerce, and also the human element of it. So basically, the article is focusing on the three pillars of sustainability. It's environmental, I guess, social impact, and the profits of it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it's nice to see that kind of approach to it. I think the key part of it is that to understand that focusing on sustainability right now may take investments from the businesses and may, in fact, bottom line negatively right now. But in the long run, there's lots of references that consumers prefer sustainable goods. So one of those things you may need to step back one step and to be able to move forward 2 or 3 steps and create your sustainable revenue. Because big thing about sustainability, that the meaning of it is continuation, isn't it? Sustainability in e-commerce means sustainable revenue long term as well.
Preparing yourselves.
Preparing yourself, exactly. And of course, the good thing that modern day technology helps you along the line. And there was a lot of references, and we know it ourselves, like delivery, right? So our whole delivery started when COVID kicked in, never gone back because people used to the convenience. And of course, big point of sustainable e-commerce is electrical vehicles. So try to do deliveries with electrical vehicles. Okada is very good in it. Obviously, article referring to Amazon, but Amazon deliveries in our area are often done by individuals. But I can see the Okada food lorries, they're all electrics. So it's very good. Then, of course, packaging. And we had the experience ourselves when you go to the, I think it was Morrison's or something, buy something. And it was boxed as a paper box. You open it, and it's another plastic box, and then another inside of plastic box, every biscuit in another plastic box, right? So it's one of the examples of greenwashing. Yeah, you have paper box at the top, right? So I think this article referring to packaging, I mean, it's kind of obvious things, but then again, as a consumers, we have to admit that a cucumber that is not wrapped up in something plasticky is not going to have a shelf life as long as the plasticky wrapped up cucumber. So I think it's also education of the consumers that maybe this trades off, because some packaging that is sustainable not as convenient and not as doesn't preserve the products for such a long time. So I think it comes hand in hand. Introducing new technologies and education, it's very important.
And Tanya, I know that was, by the way, that was brilliantly introduced. And anyone that wants to check out the article, we'll include it within links to the materials for this show. I'm going to ask you, Ololi, like we've touched on this in other shows, and I'm fascinated to get your take on this from an e-commerce perspective. But like what you described was brilliant, and there are obviously ways you've just described, 2 really good ways that we essentially e-commerce firms out there can think about how to become more sustainable, if you like. Is there just like a fundamental, uncomfortable truth at play, though, with e-commerce? That e-commerce essentially is the modern manifestation of accessible overconsumption, and that ultimately the issue here is education. You alluded to education, but education for customers about the impact of engaging in e-commerce. Because ultimately, it is just a consuming, even though you're consuming more sustainably, perhaps you're choosing to engage with organizations that, think about their delivery and make sure that they utilize sustainable delivery. They're thinking about their packaging. They're thinking about perhaps the recyclability or the circularity of the products that they're providing. But even though that's all happening, the choice to purchase, the choice to consume is ultimately the thing that's driving this entity that is having an impact. I know this is a contentious thing to throw at you, but what's your take upon the question of consumption?
Well, if you go to our website, it has a very interesting statistic straight in your face that 60% of greenhouse gas emissions that are responsible for climate change, it's because of our consumptions, right? So this is a number you cannot deny. And to underline your words, yes, I mean, we are as guilty as we are, but sort of it's one of those things you don't go into a brewery and tell people to stop drinking, isn't it? Because it doesn't really work.
I think you're referred to as a party pooper if you start going knocking on brewery doors and going, guys, just want you to stop drinking in here. Yeah, sorry, carry on.
Exactly. So you can't really people stop shopping online because it's, especially coming from Somerset, I really appreciate it, right? Otherwise, I wouldn't have half of the stuff that I actually had because I couldn't drive everywhere to get it. So I think you just take it as a given that this is the rule that is there. It's not going to go away. But I think promoting more sustainable brands, maybe giving, that is what I was saying, to affiliate networks that obviously manage sustainable brands, give more prominent featuring, I don't know, give more educational information, proper scoring, it's what we haven't touched on it, but proper objective information about the brand straight into consumer face so they can make decisions, informed decisions, and then obviously educate consumers that, yeah, maybe your, I don't know, t-shirt from Finisterre is, relatively expensive, but then it will survive 150 washes in comparison to only 5 washes from another brand or something like that. So it's one of those things, I don't know, it's a long way to go, but it's like with smoking, somebody at some point thought it was a good idea to introduce some bans or whatever. So it wasn't working straight away, but over time we can see people less smoking now, right? So I think e-commerce is the same. So if you start now and educate people on better choices and whatever, then eventually, it should work, I guess.
And I think that's a really compelling. I think my slightly idealistic comment, if you like, or not idealistic comment, but unrealistic comment, if you like. I think you sort of combated that brilliantly by suggesting, look, people are gonna consume. Like ultimately, that we're not going to be able to row back from the kind of consumer-driven culture that we essentially exist within. But what we can do is create ways of ensuring that the options available to the consumer are as sustainable as possible, or certainly the sustainable options are prioritized in terms of the promotion to the customer. And I think that's obviously where the work that you're doing at Question Zero really comes in. Let me ask you, Tanya, I want to get your take. It's a practical question, but besides, I want to think about the levers that e-commerce businesses have to be more sustainable. We've obviously spoken about like delivery and EV fleets, etc., to allow you to deliver is one thing. Perhaps some other interesting things around kind of delivery kind of patterns and how you go about kind of combining delivery and all of those. I imagine there's lots of stuff in that. Then you've got the packaging element, which obviously is key. What other levers are at play from an e-commerce perspective in terms of improved sustainability of an e-commerce business?
Well, I mean, it depends how you look, because obviously digital itself, because e-commerce is a digital part of production. Yeah. I mean, digital itself is actually where we are suffering, because we are trying to be CO neutral, but we can't because we use Amazon services, right? So if you look at the digital part of the fronting of the whole thing, well, more hosting is needed in Iceland, I guess, right? Or wind farms powering the servers, that would really help in that just very simple way. But of course, we are talking about the actual producers, okay? And the producers are producing their goods, let's say, I don't know, in Australia, something like that, right? And that through e-commerce, I can buy it like from America, I can buy it in here. So it's one of those things we do it on our websites. We always try to advise for the geographical location, because it's doable. You can do it from the consumer point, in a sense of not only advising on more sustainable product, but also closer to you, produce closer to you, so it has less air miles, less whatever. So there is ways of geo-targeting not only consumers, but also matching with more suitable by geo, producers. So it can be AI optimization, I guess, some intelligent recommendation, personalization to the consumers on that side. I mean, but it's also, I think, e-commerce is all about click-through. It's all about completion of the sale and so on, right? It also comes to the ethics of the e-commerce business, that what you feature on the completion, because you know that more teenagers may probably be able only afford Shein, okay? But it's your company decision. Do you want to put it in front of their faces, or do you not want to put it in front of their faces? So one of those measurements, corporate policy, is very important to have in place, and educate other e-commerce, I don't know, retailers, I guess, that again, immediate profits now is great, but they need to think more long-term sustainable revenues, and the younger generations want to buy more sustainable goods. So this is your future shoppers. So it's not only educating consumers, but also educating a lot of marketeers and affiliates. It works both ways, because the brand Shein is promoted by, well, I mean, I know one network, they have about 2 million affiliates on it, right? And I guarantee that a lot of them plug that brand banner on their shopping website or something like that because it sells. But if you nudge them that, yes, great, you can earn your little money right now on it, but it's not good long term. So it's education goes both ways, consumers and also those marketing people who promote all of that stuff.
Tanya, can I throw this? Might worry a question that you can bat this one back to me if you don't like it, but I want to draw a comparison between the experience that you went through with your first business and ultimately the narrative we spoke about before of, I'm going to go and be commercially successful. I'm going to realize, a positive exit. And then ultimately that's going to allow me to focus my energies and efforts on doing something more purpose-driven and impactful, and I know, sorry, I've massively generalized it, but that essence. What would your advice be to somebody who is at the moment running an e-commerce business and they are very much at the beginning of their career in the sense of they're focusing only on commercial outcome. They're only really concerned about commercial outcome with a view to exit right now. And the impact and potential sort of purpose-driven work that they might want to do with their career is something that they envisage doing, but they're going to do it once they've realized the successful exit of this purely commercial company. What would your advice be to them? Would it simply be that, look, even if you're focusing on the commercial outcome, the point is that to realize the best commercial outcome, most organizations now need to look at adopting these sustainability principles. So it's a business case point. It's not you want to make money and you want to have impact at the same time. Isn't this lovely?
It is a business case. And if you talk to impact investors who actually put in money now into businesses, because obviously times move on, profits is still the important part. So if you're driving your business now and you want to prepare it for sale, unless you are somehow based in America and they have really strange valuation techniques, but otherwise most of the companies that if you want to sell and be successful and exit it, you have to generate some sort of revenue, unless, like I said, unless you're Twitter or whatever. So I don't know, to me it was always in parallel. And even though, yes, like back in the day it was more focused on the money, but I think I kept my sanity by going to jungle trips. Okay, so for me, I did
jungle trips.
Yeah, I did travel Amazon. Okay, and
cool.
I went to Australia. I did the wild Australia basically. To me, you have to have some inspiration. Even if you're in the most boring business that is just focused on the money and whatever, but you dream about something, it's always good to go and touch that little thing that you dream about. It keeps you focused, it keeps you driven, and I don't know, it just gives you positive vibes to complete what you are doing right now and move to the next thing. So keep it in parallel, keep it on the back of your mind. This is what I would advise.
That's such a good piece of advice. Yeah, don't get totally consumed by what it is that you're working on right now. Give yourself the outlets in order to experience what's next and use that as motivation within what you're currently doing to understand that's what's coming. Brilliant. I had another question when we were talking about e-commerce. And related to, we were saying before, weren't we, about the different levers that can be played. And I think you spoke about education. I mean, education is core to your belief in terms of all stakeholders, our supply chain, the retailers that we're working with in an e-commerce perspective, our customers, potentially our board and our investors, like, again, understanding the long-term, preparation of ourselves and the building of sustainable revenue. So summarizing here, Tanya, would that be the key takeaway, is that as an organization, we have to be sustainable, we have to really look at education of all our stakeholders?
Definitely. And as a human beings, we are generally, relatively intelligent, at least we try to believe it. So,
you are.
But to me, it's like, as an example, how we came sour scoring, because we talked to all these amazing professors and finance people and whatever, and they had all this information for quite a few years. All this sustainability reporting, it was hidden there somewhere. You can pay lots of money and get your report, but it was not delivering the impact on a bigger scale. But educating the right people about this can deliver impact, right? So taking those reports and putting them in mass, putting them in the audience, so when you buy your Finisterre t-shirt, you can read up a little bit about Finisterre. If you buy your Primark, whatever, you also can read up about Primark. And it's not good to say consumer, oh, choose this, not choose this. As a human beings, we want to know why we should make those kind of choices. So education to your customers is really paramount. And of course, educating your internal, staff and so on, in the sense of like why we are doing things, educating your investors, like don't ask for money back yet, we have to do a couple of good things, just hold on to it. So it all comes to communication and education. And I think it's dealing with people like yourself also helps businesses to put the information in a broader audience.
And I think on that, just to touch on that, I think there's that, and this is obviously at the heart of what you guys are doing at Question Zero. It's the accessibility of that information. It's making it accessible, making it understandable, making it something that can effectively support quick but informed decision making. And I think that's what, anyone out there that's interested in finding out more about Question Zero, Tanya's startup, I'd really recommend having a look. We'll obviously include links, etc., to the website and all our materials. Tanya, we have just scratched the surface, I know, when it comes to talking e-commerce, and I feel like with such an expert in the room, it's a great shame that we don't have hours and hours to unpick more of your thoughts on this. But I'm going to finish things now by asking you the magic wand question. So, Tanya, if we were to hand you our ever used magic wand, and you could change one thing about the commercial world this instant, what would that one thing be?
I would have a marker on every product. And I mean on every product. Like when you buy sugar, salt, when you buy food now, you can see how much sugar in it, how much salt in it. So I think this kind of marker related to sustainability should be in the face of everybody. And then it will just fix itself. We won't buy the bad stuff, and we will push revenues and profits towards a better company. And I believe in natural balance and all of that.
Do you know what? I love when we ask this question and people come up with like brilliantly simple solutions, essentially. And then what we don't do is we don't then unpick, well, Tanya, how are we going to go about actually doing this? So, I mean, in your mind, do you foresee a situation where we will ever have that kind of benchmarked data consensus on, this is sustainable, this is not? And is that something that Question Zero is that something you're looking to try and achieve?
Well, I mean, yeah, we had a big breakthrough when we got the data license from financial people to allow to show this data to consumers, right? So basically we are halfway through. And if you think about it, like John Lewis, we were the first ones to introduce those sugar, salt, and fat markers, traffic lights. And it was quite a few years ago when nobody even thought about it. But they took this initiative, they took it as an example, and then pretty much most of the food stores are doing it now. So it's all doable. So we just need to get one or two big sustainability-focused, really exciting brands to do that. And I'm sure the rest will be following.
Tanya, I have to say, I, for one, I'm really excited to follow the journey of Question Zero. I think in terms of what you've just packaged up and suggested, it seems obtainable, which is great, and it seems inspirational too. So, fantastic, Tanya. Thank you so much for joining us this morning for a whistle-stop tour of sustainability issues affecting e-commerce, and thank you for being so open and sharing your story with us. It's been fantastic.
It was a pleasure. Thank you.